Hey everybody, Ken Pooch Van Druten here along with Chris Rabold.
What's going on, guys?
Hey, we're up to episode 17. We are still stuck at home and still under quarantine and still don't have jobs. Nope. And so we're going to sit here and take the brighter step and talk about audio, something that we love to do, and not think about all the fact that the world is collapsing around us. How about that?
Absolutely. We're just going to keep talking.
No, but I mean, seriously, it's like we love talking about audio, and that's why we come here and do this. We hope that it's a little bit of a shining star for you guys that are having a rough time out there. So thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And we thanks all for your comments, and make sure that you subscribe to our channel if this is your first time here. Today's topic is,
drum roll, please. We're going to talk about PAs today.
Yes, we're going to talk about PAs today. All right. Well,
comments. I think I've seen some in the comment section, but I know people have reached out to me. They're like, "You guys going to talk about your favorite PAs?"
Yeah,
going to talk PAs. So I figured, let's do it.
Cool, right on. So, and not even necessarily, it doesn't have to be favorite PAs as far as, I don't think this should be, top 5 favorites or whatever. It should be just a discussion about what PAs we like to use, what PAs we've run into,
the how and why.
Yeah, the how and why. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
But having said that, I think that maybe that's where we should start. What is your favorite PA?
As of right now, when me specking a PA means absolutely nothing, because there's nowhere to go with it.
No one ever gives us that opportunity anymore, do they?
No. I'm pretty set on L-Acoustics these days.
Cool.
And not just these days. It's kind of been that on and off for a long time. But that's sort of home base for me. There's essentially number one, and then there's like 2 through 4 or 2 through 5 that are interchangeable.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
And are you, they have several flavors. Do you like all of them? Like K1, K2, Cara?
No. And it's funny with most manufacturers, I tend to just like I don't always believe that voicing is, very few companies seem to it's just impossible with different driver sizes, to nail a consistent voicing throughout their product line. So when it comes to L-Acoustics, I really like K1. I really like K2. I've never done a side-by-side shootout, like a truly clinical study of the two. And I hear people say they have preferences between the two.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if you ask me to spec it right now, I'm going to say K1. Of course. There's other people that like K2 as well. And then some of their smaller boxes, I like the Cara for what it does. What are the Floans? It's so funny. It's my favorite PA. And you know how it is. We work on so many, I start to lose model number. Flown subs are typically the KS1Bs. Did I say that right? Whatever the Flown subs, those are great. And then now the big knock on L-Acoustics for a long time were the subs, the subs,
Yeah, I mean, SB218s were they were,
Right. It was okay. Back in the day with like VDOS, for example, you would use, most of the times they would pair VDOS with some other sub. Right. I'm talking at the early outings.
Yeah, of course.
Like when I was using Electrotech, we would use VDOS, and they had it wasn't the Q sub, what was that rig? Q, goddamn. Anyway, whatever the flagship Electrotech rig was, it wasn't those primarily. They had the double 18s that we would use.
Their own proprietary subs coupled with the old school VDOS. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah.
So now I feel like a lot of people still feel that way about L-Acoustics, that maybe the subs aren't there, but I feel like that's a holdover from years past. So
I think so too. I think that, the SB28s are that's a great sub, dude. It's really a good sub. It has a note to it that's pretty musical, and
point. It does have tonality to it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not only power.
Totally. But also it is the power that traditionally was been the problem, at least for me, with L-Acoustics, was the subs prior to that were okay, but they didn't have the massive power that so many other guys have had.
No, they didn't. When I was on Florence, I did Florence and the Machine for just a short period of time, which was fucking awesome, by the way. But when we were out, it was through Firehouse, and we took delivery of their new subs on that tour, and they were, man, it was all, I can't remember what they're called, but, and I think we paired them with the new amp rack. It was like a new showing altogether, and that's when I really, which for that music, that doesn't take like the chest pounding sort of power that we need on some of our gigs, but still, I just like that sound. I like power. I like quick, not to make this all about subs, but I like a quick sub, not a flubby hang around sub. So, but yeah, on that gig we took delivery of that, and that was one of the best sounding gigs, I swear to God, I've ever done. So, yeah, but L-Acoustics is, it is. It's my favorite. I mean, I can tell you what I don't like about it too. You know what I mean?
Let's hear it. I mean, that's kind of what this discussion is about.
Yeah. So for me, what I do like about K1 or L-Acoustics in general, first of all, I love what you think about it goes back to VDOS, when they changed the game altogether, and Christian Heil did, with what can be done in the vertical and the horizontal, like the stability of the pattern throughout is just what you hear. That's really, that's where the science is. That's where the money is keeping it consistent within. And I love the fact you can walk from one edge of the pattern to the other.
Yeah.
And I really you don't hear a lot of variation tonally. Even some of my favorite PAs, when I start to get out on the edges, suddenly there's something hanging out there. So it's the consistency of the pattern, the tonal consistency of the pattern. I like the low end of, not the subs, but the low end. It is a very musical sounding, it's very full, but it's not flabby. It's very solid. And then I'll use musical again as you extend upwards once you get into the HF, like the true HF.
Right.
It has the most musical HF out there. However, because it's musical, I feel it's musical because it doesn't feel, to me, to my ear, it doesn't feel very hyped. Now, that can also, at times, if I'm in a certain venue, I kind of wish it had a little more pizzazz to it. Yep. You know what I mean?
Totally know what you mean.
So it's the lack of pizzazz, it's the lack of forced pizzazz that I love about it. But then when I want it, I'm like, God damn it, I wish it had a little more of that on top of it. You know what I'm saying?
I totally get it. My PA choices of the things that I like, I think are a little bit more along the lines of pizzazzy PAs. I like PAs that have a thing about them. Part of the reason that I would say L-Acoustics is not my number one choice, in fact, it's maybe down into 2, 3, or 4, is because of that. It is a great sounding PA, and it does everything that you expect a PA to do. All the frequencies are covered, all the stuff is there. But to me, there's not one single thing I can say about that PA where I'm like, man, that's amazing. Like, for instance, I like Adamson a lot. And the reason that I like Adamson so much is because the way that the waveguide is, man, snare drums, vocals, guitars are just amazing. Like, you pull something up into an Adamson PA and you go, wow, listen to that vocal, man. That's amazing, because it has that thing about it. Now, there's other parts of that PA that might be a little bit deficient or whatever, just like any PA. But to me, it's like, I guess I describe it as being boutique-y. I like boutique-y PAs, as opposed to K1, which is, like I said, it's an excellent PA, but it's super linear. There's like nothing about it that is, I don't know, nothing that sticks out when you try it. Does that make sense?
No, it's not an exciting PA. It's not a wow you PA. And that it's, and you're not saying hyped by any means, but it doesn't have.
No, I don't mean hyped. I mean something about the PA. For instance, if we were talking about cars, I would say I like the Ferrari because its acceleration is unbelievable. Its braking, not so much, but its acceleration is amazing. And that's why I like that car as opposed to a I don't know, an American muscle car that is like, yeah, it's fast and it goes and it whatever, and yeah, it brakes well too. It does all the things, checks all the boxes, but there's something about the Ferrari that I'm like, it's fucking cool. The Ferrari's cool. So that's kind of what I mean. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And you mentioned Adamson. Of course, when we said we were going to talk about this, I jotted down a few things. I have a feeling if I spent more time on I'm going to call it the E series. Is that what they call it?
It is.
It's not new anymore, but it's new.
Well, they have two new series. So they have the E series and then the S series, which is S12. But yes, E series is the one. Yeah. The
E. Yeah. I love that PA.
Yeah, it's great.
Love that PA. But I just have far more miles on the L-Acoustics.
Totally get it.
Platform as a whole. But as far as what excites me, as far as PAs that are out there, the Adamson, that box, and honestly, all of it, you talk about like what is a holy shit moment. Those subs.
Oh man.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just one of their subs, but any of the offerings, even that like single 18 or 19 or whatever that thing is. And good God, that thing's impressive.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling with more time, Adamson would be, I wouldn't know which one to say. You know what I mean?
I totally get it. I mean, to back up a little bit, I took us kind of into Adamson, but actually Adamson isn't my favorite box. It's not number one on my list. It's a really close number two. But actually, you know what, dude? My favorite PA right now for sure is the Claire Cohesion.
Yeah.
There's something about that box. I've done it now on rap artists. I did Travis Scott, I did Jay-Z on it, and then I'm doing Iron Maiden on it. So it kind of, it's one of those PAs that's like somehow it works for all styles of music, if that makes sense. Man, I just really dig the shading that they do, the walkthrough shading that they do, and the I don't know, just something about the whole wave guide and the impact and the subs. Man, I really think that PA is pretty stellar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of wow factor, subs, and the cohesion.
Yes.
That is, I mentioned on here, we've talked about a few different things where I'm like, oh, it's black magic. Oh, they've sold their soul. Oh, I use that metaphor a lot. Those subs, holy shit. In the numbers that we now only need to do the same job, where before you would have had 48 double 18s, and now suddenly you have 12.
Yes.
Those things are absolutely stunning.
They are.
And to talk about fast, like that would probably be, if I had to say right now, maybe what's my favorite sub out there, it would be either the Adamson or it would be the Claire. It would be the Cohesion. Yeah,
I agree. Those are my top two, and they've kind of flip-flopped. It's really weird. I was the guy, if you go searching on the web right now and you hear me talk 10 years ago, all I talk about is how I hate 12-inch PAs.
Right.
Like every time that someone asked me about speakers, I'd always be like, man, 12-inch PAs just don't cut it in that 100 to 250 range. It's just, you have to have a 15-inch PA to make that happen. And if you guys don't know, the Claire Cohesion is a 12-inch PA.
Right.
And so my favorite PA right now is a 12-inch PA. So that goes to show you that the technology has changed drastically over time. And now Honestly, that 12-inch PA in that range, it's unbelievable how far down the low end of that box goes.
It really is. Just and again, I said I have a number one, and then I have this 2 through 4, and I don't know.
Well, I do too. I know. Yeah.
Of course. And and for me, the Cohesion fault, it's somewhere on any given day, it's somewhere in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And honestly, on certain days, maybe it makes it to number one. But what they've done, I know it's amazing. It's like, it's the same drive. It's just technology, man. It's the same driver size, a 12-inch. And even you look at like what the most popular of the past decade, when D&B came out and had a lot of success with the J series, even if people didn't like it, it still did a lot with 12-inch drivers. You know what I mean? But that PA, which I've got as many miles on that as any human being on this planet, it can't do it without flown subs or without ground subs. It has to have other low-end support. You can turn the Cohesion rig on now with you need subs. However, without it, and you testify to this as well, I mean, you turn it on and it is a thumpy ass bitch.
It is.
Right out of the box, you know?
Well, that's the difference, though. I think there's an overall philosophy in PA manufacturers, and where there are PA manufacturers that use the sub to emphasize the low end part, so that the actual crossover point is maybe a little bit higher, to try to give more oomph to the low end part of the PA. And I actually, for instance, J series is that way, just like what you just described. And so to me, it's more of, rather than it being sub, it's low end extension. Rather than being sub. And I prefer the other way, which is a PA that goes pretty far down in there, and then the sub is getting all the impact shit, like the 40, 50, hertz stuff that you want to move air with and focus all its energy on that, whereas the PA is still handling all of the, even down into 50, 50, 60 and above. And to me, that's the best combination. So that's why I choose, Claire is my number one, because of the sub information, but also that the PA goes all the way down, like you just said.
And, that's an interesting point. Like, I think about when I first started, I probably didn't know where to ask where subs were crossover, what the point was. But if you think about it, 15, 20 years ago, whatever it might have been, hell, maybe just even 10, the most common crossover point in a sub was often like 80.
80, yeah.
80 is what subs, 80 and below. Now, it's that bottom octave.
Yeah.
It's that 30 to 60 kind of thing that we're asking subs to do. And I too, and that's the thing I like about really both L-Acoustics and the Claire PA. And Adamson can do it too, but again, the Claire, the Cohesion and the L-Acoustics, the ones I have the most time on, particularly as of late, they go down to a healthy low end where they can still give you plenty of punch, but you're not going into limit. You're not worried that by asking it to really go there, that you're then going to be choking, and that's new in speaker technology, where the systems can go lower, survive a big kick drum, a big bass guitar, a big 808 drop, whatever, and not choke. And now those subs are just doing the critical bottom stuff. I love about, kind of what we're talking about. Since PAs can go lower, you augment that with a flown sub, which, for me, I've talked about my target curve. That target curve is the main array with a flown sub element. And beyond that, I just kind of pepper the subs in to taste, depending on what their role is. But
the floor subs, you mean? So the
ground sub, yes,
ground sub, yeah. Because I'm exactly the same way. Like, there's a lot of guys that use their floor sub to be the impact, right? And it, depending on the width of PAs, you can make this power alley happen. And also the coverage goes away. You get these fingers of sub information that is not there, with only flown subs. So there's kind of this trade-off that you have to have. You have to have floor subs to kind of do the even coverage on the ground. But for me, like, I grew up in a time when there was only two sources. There was a left and a right. There was not left, right sub, right? And so I'm just talking about like consumer audio or whatever. There was left and right. I was a recording engineer. So when I got to mixing on PAs, it was a little foreign to me because, back then it was a lot of floor subs, not a lot of flown. And so it always like bugged me that your attention would get focused, pulled down to where the subs were, because you had to have them turned up so much to give low end information. And then all of a sudden there's three pieces of audio coming at you, if that makes sense. So nowadays, with great speaker technology and flown subs, now I feel like, again, thank God, we're back to it's a left and a right. You know what I mean? So that excites me to think about that, because I'm thinking about anyone listening. There's our peers that are going to hear this and go like, oh, yes, I agree. Yes, I disagree. And then there's some 18-year-old that stumbled upon it, doesn't know who either of us are. Like, what are these guys talking about? And that's the person that in this conversation, this is so like learning how to listen to PAs is so like mission critical, where I would like to, of course, we never want to tell anybody what to do, but I would encourage anyone to think of exactly what you just said, man. That's brilliant. Like, I don't want to be thinking about a third component. I want to be thinking about music. I want to be thinking about mixing into this system as a whole, not one system with its big buddy underneath. Yeah, exactly.
and that's also hard for, systems guys or front of house guys that are tuning their PAs and at a large level or small level, where there is a lot of, it's very easy to fall into check out how badass my subs are. Totally. And make very uneven sounding thing. And I would encourage everyone to just at least give it a try to treat it as one thing and give yourself a safe sonic palette to start with, and ignore the urge to just crush with subs, Totally. At least that's the way I go about it.
That's absolutely the same way that I do. I think that it is a real skill for a system engineer to get a PA correct in that, where the sub crosses over to the low end part of the PA and then all the way up to 250. Like, getting that right, the sub all the way up to 250 is, to me, the hardest part about a PA. The rest of it is you can put in prediction software and go, okay, I'm spraying, mid-range and high range here, and that's definitely where it's going. It's that information 250 and below that's the skill for me, for a system engineer to get right. It's a hard thing.
I think of that the area from, let's say, 250 to, okay, we'll go to 80. Because even though the traditional or the usual sub that we find these days is no longer crossed over at 80.
Right.
In my mind, maybe it's just from growing up, learning to mix when I did, I still think of sub information from being 80 and below. You know what I mean?
It is though, even though the crossover point is lower, there is still encroaching sub information, that gets up into there. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's from 80 to 250. Like, that is a bridge. And if that bridge is broken or is in any way compromised, your music will sound disjointed.
Totally.
And what's in there is the fucking groove. Like, that's where it is. That's totally. That head that it sits on. I don't think of the sub necessarily as the bass, and I mean BASE. I don't mean BASS.
Right.
It's that stuff. So yeah, you're right. That's like super critical.
I had early on in my schooling at Berklee College of Music, I had a professor describe to me the sub information and the low end information in regards to kick drum and bass guitar are the roots of the plant. And if you don't have those roots correct, the actual plant can't grow. The guitar and the vocal being the flowery part of the plant can't happen without the roots of the plant being right. And so that is, I think, a really good metaphor for what we're talking about. If you don't get that part of the PA, which usually includes the, you know, all the low end part of instruments, you know, the bass guitar and the kick drum. And, you know, I mean, even down into getting your snare drum right, you know, I tend to back off my high pass filter on a snare drum because I love that meat of a snare drum, even sometimes down to 100. Like, you know, there's some good stuff in there, you know?
That's the thud. And with a snare, if you can get a snare down there, oh man, that just opens up.
Totally.
You know, then a lot of other snares, you're like, man, I can't tell you how often I find myself at 223. I think it's because it's somewhere where like a Digico wants to go.
Yeah.
But even if I'm using like a number of SSL plugins, from like the Brainworks to the UAD to the, well, of course it doesn't give you a readout on there, to the any of them, I'm always like 223 is somewhere I go. But I love it if my snare is like 180 for the, because then it opens up all that other area for guitars or bass guitar or something like that.
Yeah. That's it, man. I mean, that's the hard part about getting a PA right, in my opinion. And that's why I spoke for years and years about wanting it to be a 15-inch PA, because prior to probably, I don't know, 8 years ago, only 15-inch PAs, in my opinion, got that part right. You know what I mean? Where in that range that we're talking about. So, yeah, it's crazy. So kind of circling back around to our favorite PAs, you know, I always say to people, just like what you said, you know, you have a favorite one, and then there's like 2, 3, and 4, and 5. To me, if we're talking about the top 5 PAs in the world, we're kind of talking about the same thing. To me, it's like ice cream. You know, you might like chocolate and I might like vanilla, but it's ice cream. Like,
everybody's having a good time.
Everybody's having a good time. We're having some ice cream and it's good. So like when we're talking about the top 5 for me, I would take any of the 5. You know, if you said to me, hey, there's going to be L-Acoustics K1, I'm great. I'll be there and it's going to be good. But it is, if you're asking me to make an order of things, you know, I mean, just like ice cream, I like vanilla best, and chocolate is somewhere down the list, you know, like number 4. You know, and in between that is like cherry and, you know, whatever.
Right.
For me, it's Cohesion first, then Adamson. And you are kind of the other way around. You liked K1 first, and then what's your second one? Was it Adamson?
It probably is, but that's based on only using it 3 times.
Got it.
So I should probably say, I'll say that. Fuck it. Adamson, Cohesion.
Okay.
But I reserve the right to flip 2 and 3. But that's an answer. I'll commit to it, you know.
No, I mean, that's an answer. And what's funny is that in our top 3 is the same PAs, basically. You know, I'm Cohesion, Adamson, and then probably K1. So it's just in a different order for us, but those are our top 3. When you start getting a little bit further down the list, let me point something out here that I think is very interesting, though. You mentioned Kristen Heil earlier with L-Acoustics, and you know, I love old school VDOS. Like,
me too.
In some instances, if I were like in South America and they were like, well, you know, we have
down there still.
I know. Yeah. We only have, you know, 12 aside K1, or we have 16 aside regular VDOS. I would almost say bring the regular VDOS, because it has a signature to it that I really like still.
Me too.
And I've overanalyzed this a lot about what's going on. You mentioned Kristen Heil earlier. Well, his partner was this guy named Paul Bauman.
And I know where you're going, and I'm so glad you're going. I agree.
And Paul Bauman, I've told Paul this to his face. We've become friends, and in my career, I have chased Paul Bauman to wherever he goes, and so I gotta believe that there is
unknowingly, right?
Unknowingly, and now I've kind of figured it out, and
you could pay him.
Yeah. I analyzed this and said, well, how come I've gone to these different PAs? And then went, well, wait a minute. Every time I've gone to these PAs, Paul Bauman was a part of it. There must be something about his particular signature that I like. And I truly believe that that's true. So he had a lot to do with regular VDOS. Love that. He had a lot to do with original Adamson Y series. I went from, using Prism and then regular VDOS to basically discovering Adamson Y series and meeting Jesse Adamson and going, holy shit, this box sounds amazing. Brock Adamson had a lot to do with that. It's an amazing sounding box. I ended up at Adamson. Then he left Adamson and went to JBL and developed the version 4 or whatever for the 4889s that everyone went, oh, holy shit, this is a whole other PA.
Suddenly it was usable.
He was the guy that wrote that. And then he was the original designer of VTX. Yeah, obviously, in all of these cases, don't get me wrong, he had lots of help and outside input from all kinds of other people. But I know that there's some sort of thing about his signature that I really like and I've chased over the years. So I say all that to kind of take us to what my next choice would be. And my next choice is the JBL VTX, actually. And also their newer A12 or whatever is also a very good box, which kind of is a legacy of Paul's, but Paul didn't design that particular box. But anyway, the VTX is my next choice, and mainly because of the Paul signature, but also because of the amazing high-end driver that's in that box. It's a driver called the D2 driver, and it's just the sparkly bits in that box are amazing.
And it's funny. I was saying I like a kind of a more neutrally softer high end, but the problem is I don't find many people do sparkly well. Sparkly oftentimes sounds processed, and I hate that. I've said on here before. I don't like that 11K, 13K hiss that sounds like a $75 Chinese microphone you bought at Full Compass 15 years ago. Like, I don't like that, and JBL, yeah, right. It's like it's bright, but it's done well.
Yeah.
And that's the PA. I knew you were going to say that because I knew we both talked about it. For me, it was several years ago. That's when I was with our buddy Mike Hackman. It was Lady Gaga. We were going through all these different areas. The only area where we didn't carry PA, it was like Israel and Korea and Turkey in this particular occasion. And it was really great because we had this mix that had been going for like a year plus. It was cool. I was just getting ready to try out all these different PAs. And everywhere we went, they had giant hangs, and it was great. So we were in Turkey, and I had this JBL VTX. Now, I too found I had such a bad taste in my mouth over the JBL Vertex series when it first came out. I was like, what is this?
The original, yeah. It was like, what is happening?
This fucking thing.
Yeah.
And so much so that I kind of heard rumblings that there were better, because I never toured with it. I'd only have it on one-offs. I heard that there were some, hey, have you heard? And you're right, it was version 4. And then I think there was a version 5,
there
right?
Was, yeah.
For all I know, there's on version 18 now. But I remember I was with this band and we weren't carrying PA, and we hit a lot of Vertec, and suddenly I was having good shows on Vertec. Now, I never knew that Paul Bauman was a part of that. What I did know is that I went to Turkey. I was expecting to not like this JBL offering that was put in front of me, and I fucking loved it. I loved it. I talked about it so much to anyone that would listen, and so many people either had also had poor experiences with whether it was they were just a JBL hater or it was because of the Vertec or before that the HLA or whatever it was, I could tell people didn't want to hear me. And I almost understood. I'm like, no, this is that good.
Totally.
Then that's when I found out that the developer, the chief designer, was this guy, Paul Bauman, who I don't think I've ever met him.
Oh man, he's the sweetest Canadian. He's so awesome. I love him.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I had the same thing. And so in turn, every time people would ask me, like, and I felt so good to make a rider, and put JBL VTX in there, because I was like, no, I want people to know about this. and I've said before, I was like, I would tour with it. I really, really, really like it. And the A12s, I've never actually mixed on myself, but I've been at well, no, that's not true. I did an iHeart thing this year that was on it, but it was kind of a throw and go. But I know he's not involved, but like you nailed it. It's a legacy.
It's legacy, a lot of the stuff that he designed, but it came along. There's a newer guy there that's kind of their design guy moving forward. A really good friend of mine, I got to give a shout out to him. Raul Gonzalez is been with JBL for at least 20 years. And, I did a Kiss Symphony gig in Melbourne, Australia in 2000 or something. I don't remember, but it was a 60-piece symphony orchestra and the rock band Kiss. And it was a giant Vertec rig that Raul came down and helped with, and also the rest of that Kiss tour in Australia. And he's a badass. What I learned from him was K1 and a lot of other companies are doing things now called turnkey, right? Where you buy their stuff and everything is the same. And the idea behind the process is it's the same amplifiers, or same cabling, same rigging, same box everywhere in the world. So when you show up, it'll be the same PA. Unfortunately, in my opinion, JBL has kind of fallen. They've taken the other route, which is there's 100 different options. Mm-hmm. You can have 13 different, crossovers and 60 different amplifiers, and you can wire the boxes in high performance mode or not, which is either 3 boxes in a circuit or 2 boxes. So what that turned into, unfortunately, is guys like us, when we advance, there is literally 30 questions you have to ask when you advance for a JBL VTX rig, let's say, because you need to know what are the options that they've had. And if they have chosen some bad options, then that PA is not going to respond. Most likely the PA that you got in Turkey was their everything top of the line amps, everything in 2 circuits, 2 boxes a circuit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and that PA, that VTX PA is amazing sounding. But unfortunately, you can show up to a VTX PA sounding just kind of okay. And a lot of the reason is because it's not turnkey. So unfortunately, that's kind of why, for me, JBL is further down the list. I think it's a great sounding box. It's harder to deal with. I got to do way more advancing to make sure that the box is correct.
Yeah, and that's frustrating. Like, you want to be like, yes, SM58 here. I realize PAs are far more sophisticated, like infinitely more sophisticated. But yeah, particularly when you get into the way amplifiers interact. Not that you can't take an L-Acoustics rig and put 3 boxes on it. I mean, you can do that, but when it becomes too, and then we've talked about it on here, when things kind of get a little squirrely, don't give me something to obsess over and question and wonder and I'm just like, that's not good for anybody. But yeah, that JBL thing that really surprised me how much I like that.
Yeah,
and still do. Now that I think about it, that A12 show I did, it was excellent.
Yeah.
That was Alicia Keys, and I know at the Grammys, and that's what they're using now. But I'm usually not tuning and mixing and everything else on there. That's Michael Stewart or Jeff Peterson or one of those guys or something. So they're usually actually mixing on it, but they always get a good result at it. And I have noticed that. I've noticed that as the award shows have shifted from always being Vertec to always being VTX and always being A12, all the award shows sound better now to me too. Just
I totally agree. Yeah.
Casual walking around, I'm like, yeah, this is pretty damn good.
Yeah, I totally agree. Hey, I know that you have a lot of experience with D&B, right?
I was trying to think. I was like, I can't do this discussion without going.
And I am, I mean, D&B for me is not even the next one, actually.
Yeah. No.
So
I don't know what comes after these four.
Okay.
I really don't. It would have to be D&B. Yeah. Okay. So this is my life with D&B, which is, I used Electrotech when I had I was really way into VDOS. Like I knew when it came out in the 90s, even when I was younger and I was doing clubs and stuff, I was like, no, this is where we're going. It was apparent. So when I had the ability to spec a PA, I went to Electrotech. And because I'd always liked the Electrotech shows I had heard that were not on VDOS, you know, so it was a place I knew to go. I'd always been interested in them. I was like, cool, I'll go there. We did that. And then we ended up going to we went to Claire for a minute. Then we went to 8th Day. And I had VDOS and can't even remember. Oh, and D&B subs, the B2s. And if that's a thing. So anyway, we had for the outfills, it wasn't a giant tour. So we just had a main hang and then we had something small to fill out sheds or wherever. We had these little D&B Q boxes, which were these passive little things. And we were at a casino once in Reno, I believe. And the weight was crazy. We couldn't hang our main rig. And the systems engineer taught me into using this little passive. Again, when I think passive, I think of like a PV wedge in a club.
I totally know.
Going back to they've sold their souls. There's no way this should work, et cetera, et cetera. So we hung this Q rig. Tuned it. I felt okay about it. We started the show and I laughed for 3 straight songs at how good it sounded. I could not fucking believe how good this thing sounded. So I was super stoked about it. And I said to D&B and I said to 8th Day, hey, if you ever release a large format box, I'm interested. I'd love to take it out. And they did. And so the J series came out and I think I have this right. I think it was me with Widespread Panic. This is the most eclectic group. Tom Jones and Slayer. And I would go on to mix show after show after show after show, year after year. The client list grew in stature and just had all this success on the D&B platform. And I really, really dug it. Now, I will admit it didn't throw. It didn't. And as I got into stadiums with it, I knew as I walked to front of house and listened to the support act or whatever was going on at about 100 feet, 30 meters, somewhere in there, it started to do this, So I really did. I loved it. I didn't do a lot of EQ to it. I knew how to use it so well. I knew how to tune it. I really dug it. And that was right when, then I moved away from it just because my gigs changed. Not that I was like done with it or something. Right when AP came around. And for those that don't know, that's array processing. That's their way of dealing with getting high end to the far reaches where inherently it's going to roll off because of, absorption and the other things that are going to distance, So, and I heard AP originally and I was like, wow, because it did what it said it was going to do. It extended the image and the clarity and the frequency response to the farthest reaches. But I only did like a few shows on it. And then I just did other stuff for years. So to make a long story short, I came back around to it and I found the rig. I found AP to do what it said it was doing to a T, but it kind of changed the overall, to my ear, just because I put so many miles on it, it changed the overall tonality of the box. And they would say, well, if you don't like it, turn it off. Well, if you turned it off, then the whole thing just sounded wrong. So I was stuck. I'm like,
I get it.
Anyway, so it was a weird thing. And I've now come back around and I now just kind of know where I can and can't go with AP. And I don't, just because the trace flattens out, again, going back to what the measurement says versus what I hear, just because the predictive software said it's going to do that, it does that perfectly. I just don't necessarily dig what it does to the tonality. So I have found a way to kind of deal with J's and now GSL to where I've just got to kind of watch how far I tread into that. And I have to have everyone around me pump the brakes on just jacking it up so the curve looks right far away. And I'll say this, I'll shut up. It is even if I'm in an area that there's not a lot going on AP wise, it just does something in the HF in that like 11K, 12. I don't know what that sound is, but it doesn't sound like music to me. So
totally agree.
I still dig it. I love it, but I don't love it like I did before. But it is now doing things that it never did before. So fuck me. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? And they're great people. They're awesome people at the company. They know how I feel. We've been around the block together with what I think and this and that. So that's kind of my spiel. Great box. It just feels different to me now. It's still great. People are having great results with it. So good on D&B and good on anybody that's having a great show on it. I wish I was mixing on it right now.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to be. So sorry, that got long-winded. That's kind of where I've been with it. I'm very passionate about it because I really feel very strongly about it, and I really dig the people there. So I just kind of had a weird ride with it in the later years, you know.
I totally know what you're talking about. I'd mix on the PA on a stick right now. You got a couple of PVs, and I'll go mix that right now for sure. I don't care. I don't care what the speaker box is right now. I'll go mix on it. But yeah, you know, it's funny. My experience with D&B is mostly on J series, and prior to array processing, really, I've probably only mixed maybe 2 or 3 festival kind of shows using array processing, so I can't really speak to it. My experience with J series is prior to that. A very good box. I always felt that its signature and its preset was very much that non-linear curve, you know, where high end's here, low end's here. It's this like, you know, nowadays we have a lot of stuff, K1, everything is kind of like this, you know, very linear, you know, once you get past 100, you know, it's like all the way out. Whereas I always felt like D&B was doing that for a couple of different reasons. It's hard to get your mix right in those sparkly bits, like we talked about with the JBL stuff. If you are a younger mixer, let's say, oftentimes when I hear, when I'm looking for holes in someone's mix, like if they're asking me to explain to them what you know, I liked or disliked about their mix, a lot of times it's that 8K and above that is, you know, overemphasized and weird in people's mix. It's a hard part to get right. Just like for me, that 80 to 250 range is difficult in your mix. The 8K and above range is just as difficult to get right. So I feel like the D&B guys said, okay, we're going to help those people and build a preset that kind of has that missing in it. That's one kind of, I suspect that's one reason. But the other reason is I feel like what you're talking about with that array processing, that their sparkly bits, whatever the components that they have going on in that box, are just not able to reproduce that stuff clearly without harmonic distortion.
Yeah, there's something weird going on.
There's something weird. Every time that I tried to electronically gain that information back. So in other words, the preset is this. I came in and took my Lake and made a big giant filter in the top to try to make it do this. I started seeing some major holes in the components, and whether it's amplifiers or speakers themselves, just couldn't do it. Like I couldn't get that information that they had cut out of there in their preset. So it was just something that I always noticed about the box. And again, I agree with you. The box is an excellent box. If someone said to me today, hey, you're going to be mixing on J series tomorrow, I would say no problem. It's one of the boxes that I say, okay, great. Not a problem. 100% agree with you about it throws like a girl.
Now it has the strongest arm out there. It's just fucking weird looking.
Yeah.
Like it's not. It's like.
Hey, and no offense to girl engineers out there. Listen, don't send us all kinds of letters about how chauvinist I am. That's not what I meant.
So you know what? It's funny. In hearing you when you're talking, I'm thinking about kind of like you're talking about with the JBL, the high performance mode or whatever you said.
Yes.
This just goes to show that truly all things are not created equal, and PAs are so advanced now that it really, if you don't have the right guy in the systems engineer or the designer, you're screwed, because all of these PAs now, like I started thinking when you were talking just now, if you remember with VDOS, for example, when it first came out, VDOS would only sell to select, or L-Acoustics only sell to select companies. Talk about boutique. It was the ultimate in boutique. You could only use, I think it was lab grouping amps at first or whatever it came out. You could only use this. You could only do that. Then suddenly, next thing you know, Crown was something you could do. And I used it with Crown and I liked it with Crown. Then you could do it with QSC. I didn't like it with QSC. Suddenly, this box that was so great, I'd run into flavors of it I didn't like.
Yep.
Where I'm going with that is now on PAs, all the major manufacturers have some degree of array compensation. Whereas when the line length gets longer, there's inherent coupling and buildup in the low end and the low mid. And they have something, whether it's just a shelf or whatever they're doing to curtail that, you know? So you walk in with the wrong guy behind any of these rigs, but let's say a J rig, particularly the J that at the time didn't have the HF extension. And man, suddenly what honestly was supposed to be like this going down to the HF is now like this. And I remember the first time I used the Adamson PA, it was in a stadium in Seoul, South Korea. And they had array compensation, but they only had it, I don't really understand this, but they only had it to where it was functional up to 14 boxes. And we were in a giant stadium that was more than that. So even though my first show sounded great, the EQ looked horrible because I had to do all that array compensation. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I will tell you, of all the PA manufacturers, if you have a guy that doesn't know what he's doing on an Adamson PA, you're screwed. A lot of the other kind of PAs are kind of bulletproof these days. Like you fire them up, and yes, a lot of the guys have training. There's L-Acoustics training and whatever. So if you have a K1 guy, he's been thoroughly trained. But in general, if you were to just hang a bunch of K1 and then fire it up, you could probably get away with a relatively good sounding thing. Whereas Adamson, at least in my experience, I've had the same amount of boxes with the same components, with the same cabling, sound completely different with two different guys. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it matters. You know, the system engineer thing matters for sure.
One thing I wanted to point out too, and I haven't talked about this in a while, and I love this. I'm so proud of my little analogy and my metaphor that I used too on this one. Yeah. So years ago, I used another French manufacturer's PA that was kind of thrust my way. Now, I had liked their previous offerings, ironically, or liked them enough. And then I got on this thing, and man, it was just in my opinion, it was just wrong. Like it was the most skewed frequency response, whether we're talking to your ear or you would verify in the measurement. And it's like, it kind of goes back to, I tell you, L-Acoustics is my favorite PA, but I also told you I'm not so sure about immersive sound because I got the job. Now you're telling me I have to mix different. That's kind of the way I felt about this PA. It's like I had to mix into this weird frequency response. I was like, fuck you. I didn't ask. Like, this is crazy sounding. It was too by ear. Like, I need some science to go into your thing. So where I am going with this, though, is what I learned was, so I had this PA that was, aside from having these holes in it everywhere, it also had this insanely hyped high end on purpose, very much on purpose. And if I took that PA and tried to like match it on a trace to what I wanted, it was the same as, here's the beautiful metaphor. If I have 100-foot long XLR cord, right? Cable, whatever. This XLR has been around was made 25 years ago.
Yep.
It probably doesn't go over under every exact time. And it's in my best interest to, if it wants to go over, I'll just go over a few times and then get back. In other words, do what it wants to do because that's what it is. And what I learned on that PA was if I asked it to be anything too far other than what it was, it just didn't work. So I had to, and as much as I love the cohesion on the HF, and we've talked about this ad nauseum to one another, some of what's so great about it up top sometimes is a little too much for me, but God forbid you take it out because that's what it is.
Yes.
You know, and it's the same thing as if you get that guitar tone, it's just too like biting at like 1.6 or 2 or 2.5. The second you cut too much of that, it's gone because that's what it is. So yeah. I will say that, you know, if you get a PA and the sonic signature isn't totally what you like, maybe come to terms with only taking it so far because you kind of need to let it be what it is for it to function properly, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, I mean, another PA that I really like that is, it's funny, it's not really usually mentioned in most people's top kind of 5 PAs, let's say, but I think it's really great, is RCF. RCF makes some speakers that I think really compete with some of the big boys. And there are a lot of smaller companies, mainly because of their price point. They have an amazing price point. They're an Italian company too. And I've been to their factory a bunch, and I know the people that work there, and they are just super passionate about audio, man. They are like really good people, and care about, you know, speakers. And whether you know it or not, RCF has made speakers for, I don't even know, 50 years or more that have been in traditional boxes that you didn't even know they were in. Like,
yeah, go ahead, mention, because I'm thinking now it's like, oh yeah, if you had the RCF drivers and the blank, you had the good ones.
Exactly. So that's what's so funny is that if you're a little bit older mixer, you don't know it, but you've been mixing on RCF for years. The 850 box had RCF components in it. And that was a box that everyone mixed on, you know what I mean? That was like the trap box for years and years and years. And so, I just find it funny that people don't even realize that they've probably mixed on RCF speakers and they don't even know it. But anyway, their new generation of their line arrays, the 50 and the 80, are, man, I got to tell you, it's like just like any other of the boxes we've talked about today, if you told me it was going to be there, I would take it in a second. So if you haven't tried their box, it's an amazing box.
Yeah, I haven't tried them. The only thing I know about RCF is they exist, and I know you like them. Which makes me think I should probably check it out, and I'm sure I'll run into it somewhere. And you know what? I didn't even think about, the RCF drivers. Back in the day, you could have the 850s with if you had the RCF drivers, you got the good ones, or did it have the TAD drivers in there? Did it have the, there was all the different flavors. Right. Yeah, I never put 2 and 2. I even know the logo's the same, and I never put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah. Now they've been around a long time, and they're in Italian. To me, I kind of, they're like the Ferrari of PA manufacturers. They're very much, we want to be the best. We want to do stuff. They care about audio, and so, along with, we're talking about gear, but along with that, from my perspective, is good people. And if you've got good people making good audio, then I want to be involved with that company. You know what I mean? So RCF is a good company. What else? What's another one that's kind of out there that maybe people haven't heard about?
I don't know where they are in their existence or their product line now, but I ran into some Outline PAs that I enjoyed, and it was I want to say it was all around the same. It was like probably 2010, maybe 2009 to 2012, somewhere in there. I don't know why, but I would on occasion, I would run into these Outline PAs.
Yep.
And I think it was the butterfly. Is that right? Was it
Yeah. Back then, they have a whole new line now that's actually really pretty good. They're also an Italian manufacturer. Shout out to Vinny Vincent Perot out there, who kind of hooked me up. I mixed on it, and it was really good. And so shout out to Vinny for hooking that up. But yeah, I mean, Outline is also another one of those boxes that's pretty good. Have you run into the Alcons ribbon?
No,
driver PA?
No, but I'm so going back to minute 2 of this particular thing we're doing here, and I'm talking about L-Acoustics. What I like about L-Acoustics in the top end is the soft musical high end, and I often think to myself, it kind of has a ribbon-esque quality to it. So therefore, I've never mixed on it. I am incredibly intrigued by it. When I think of ribbons, I think about the fragility of them.
Right.
You know, so how does that work?
I can't speak to any of that at all. But I will tell you, Kicking and Screaming was forced to use it at a festival. It was with Iron Maiden, and Mike Hackman and I were sent this spec, and we were looking at it, and both of us were like, I've never even heard of these boxes. I don't know what they're talking about. There's no way we're using a box that neither one of us knows, you know. And we fought, like, we were like, nope, we're not doing it. And we ended up with a bunch of, talking to the guys, that the manufacturer, and having discussions, and them describing to us what's happening. And finally, we just came to a place where it was like, all right, you know what, we'll give this a shot, and see what's going on. And I think that there wasn't another choice really anyway. So it was like, all right, we're going to go ahead and use it. And I will have to tell you, it was a pretty amazing sounding show.
Really? That's good to hear. I want it to be amazing. It should sound amazing.
Yeah. And they have a presence now. Like, they were at the NAMM show this year, and they did a big demo that I couldn't be at. But, big name guys were there. Brad Maddox and Greg Price and all kinds of dudes were at their demo that they did. And from all reports from all those guys, they liked it too. I think it's a great box. I think it's, it's been around, but it's up and coming. And I think maybe you're going to see more of it. But I can't speak to any of I know what you're saying about the ribbon. Like, is it something that's going to last? We're going to drag this thing all over the world. Is it going to actually last? But
I do think I had a conversation with Chris Sullivan the other night, and we were just talking about PAs in general. We are in a kind of a weird place where, I was talking about D&B and say I'm not so sure how I felt about some of the AP settings, but I can tell you, I was supposed to be out on GSL right now, and the most recent version of it, I was like, this is pretty badass. So there are newer offerings from these companies, but we're kind of waiting on what's next.
What is the next big thing? I know.
Yeah, because we're looking at these companies now where, again, you're talking about they're putting a lot of R&D into like immersive audio. So it's the same boxes, it's just different deployments. And, Cohesion did something very interesting, particularly because they took the Claire proprietary box to the modern era.
Yep.
And that was an interesting thing. K1 in its development was pretty groundbreaking. D&B, AP or not, did a really big thing. They made the 12-inch box a viable large format box and had an immense success. So we've seen these things, and like Meyer, but right now I feel like we're kind of waiting.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm wondering, I feel like Adamson should be that, but
I'm sitting here and going, holy shit, I forgot about Meyer.
Well, of course. I know. And that's right. Of course. I know.
What the fuck am I thinking? Yeah.
You're way more into Meyer than I am.
John's signature over the years has been traditionally, lots of 400 and lots of, super sparkly bits, right? To me, every box, Milo and all their smaller kind of boxes has that signature in it, which is, that's a way to go, right? Like, you want all of your boxes to have that sound signature, and that's that. But I was never really a super big fan. And then, Michael Maxon, shout out to you, Michael, introduced me to the Leo Lion and Leopard series. And man, it is, to me, is like a great box for mixing pop stuff. And their 1100 sub, earlier
that thing's pretty devastating,
dude.
I'll give you that for sure.
Yeah. So I would be, definitely that 1100 is in that top three, Claire, Adamson, and 1100. If you're talking about subs, those are like my three. And they flip flop depending on whatever the music is. But that story is an amazing story, right? We haven't told people that when you started Justin Bieber, you started on K1.
I did.
I mixed on K1 for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 more shows. And then the PA got swapped out, not by my choice.
Right.
But actually the production manager made a choice. And do you remember why he chose?
He didn't like those brown boxes.
That's right.
Yeah, that was just it. That was the whole fucking thing. I think that was the thing. He hated me leaving. He loved you coming in, but he loved more than anything that he could get rid of that PA because he hated me for bringing it in.
So guys, it wasn't about sound. It was about the color of the PA. A brown PA versus a black PA, and
God, this is a true story.
This is a true story, and it's what VER had in inventory as a black PA was the Meyer Leo series, which of course, luckily it wasn't some weird PA that I'd never heard of because that would have been super difficult. When they said, "Oh, well, we do have Meyer, that's a black PA," and I said, "Bring it." I'll take it, But that was the weirdest experience in the world, was that you had built this mix that I was kind of riding on your coattails of, and I'd only been there for like 5 shows, and then all of a sudden they took the PA away from me and put up a totally signature different sounding PA
on a 20-something truck tour where there was no time to tune.
That's right. Yeah. So literally the day we swapped it out on a show day. So literally the day I went from one show having K1 to the next show having Leo and not having heard anything come out of the boxes until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
So shout out to Brett Stack.
I love that guy.
Oh man, he's amazing. But I can't believe that he pulled that off. Brett and Frank and Austin and all those guys that actually did something that should have never worked. Like it totally should have been a complete disaster. And they made it happen. And so I got to give them props. But anyway, yeah. So Leo should have been earlier on in this discussion. I don't know why I didn't think of it until the end, but
it's like you said though. After you get past one, you can kind of start. Dude, if I was out right now, if I was on that GSL rig, my conversation might be, you know what? I had a really weird go with AP for a few years, but now, you just don't know where you're going to be.
I know. I don't want to, get myself in trouble by making statements about something that I don't particularly like. But again, let's come back to the same comment that we had before, which is when you're talking about the top 5, certainly maybe now we're talking into top 7 or 8 PAs. They're all PAs that I would take on any gig. It's my job to make it sound good. That's just it. And whatever you bring me, I got to make it sound good. And so when you're talking about the top 7 or 8 PAs, it's like, okay, that's fine. Let's just make it work. It's really, to me, it's more about, I can make any of those top 7 PAs work for me. It's how much work I want to do to get them to where, it's usable for me.
I was thinking the same thing. I want I'm lazy.
Yeah.
I want consistency. That's why I go to the places I go. I know how to use them.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Well, I think we've come to the end of this conversation. I mean, I know that we could talk more about it, and I'm sure that we will in our episode 342 in October. But thanks for sticking with us, and we hope that it was informative. And we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Later.